Michelle screamed into the water, bubbles tearing from her throat. With her free hand, she grabbed Jens's knife. Her chest convulsed, lungs begging for air, but she raised the blade high, and she struck. Pain seared white, flesh parted, bones sang. The watch tore free. It spun in the water like a living thing, its black face glowing, its tick thunderous. For a moment, Michelle thought it would reattach, but the current seized it, dragging it downward into the abyss. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was the watch's dial flickering like an eye, unblinking. Then she knew nothing. She awoke coughing on the pier, Jens beside her. The night air sliced her lungs, each breath agony. Her wrist was mangled, the straps still fused to fragments of skin, but the watch itself was gone. The city was silent. No ticking. For the first time in weeks, silence was only silence. Jens lay on his back, staring at the fog. His chest rose and fell shallowly. Did it work? Michelle didn't answer. She stared at the black water, waiting for the watch to rise again. It didn't, but the fog shifted, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw Henrik's face reflected in the waves, smiling faintly. Chapter 7: The Hours That Remain. The fog lingered over Copenhagen long after the watch sank. A pale dawn crept through the mist, staining the streets with an anemic gray. Michelle sat hunched on a bench near the harbor, her coat heavy with salt, her wrist wrapped in Jens's torn shirt. The bandage was soaked through. The wound beneath burned with every pulse of her heart. Jens sat across from her, pale and shaking. He coughed into his sleeve, crimson flecking his lips. His ribs shifted oddly beneath his shirt, as if broken in more than one place. But he said nothing of the pain. He only stared at the water, his eyes hollow. "You saw it sink," Michelle whispered. Her throat was raw from seawater, her voice a rasp. "You saw it go down." Jens nodded slowly. "But the sea doesn't end anything. It only buries." The silence that followed was heavier than sound. They found the city changed when they tried to leave the harbor. The fog had thinned, but not dispersed. Streets remained deserted. Bicycles leaned against walls where their riders had vanished. Cafes stood open with cold cups of coffee, still steaming faintly, as though time itself had been cut. Michelle tested a door to a bakery. It opened easily. Inside, loaves sat in neat rows, untouched. A radio crackled behind the counter, repeating the same 4 seconds of static and tone over and over, as though the signal had jammed mid-broadcast. She backed out quickly, her pulse rising. "This isn't right," she muttered. Jens dragged himself along the street, one hand pressed to his ribs. The mechanism was already winding. We stopped the weight from falling further, but he trailed off, gaze distant. "I don't know if we stopped the clock entirely." They reached the small flat Michelle had rented weeks ago. The door was locked, untouched. Relief washed through her, though faint. Inside, everything remained as she'd left it. Suitcase half unpacked, books from the museum scattered on the table. Normal. Too normal. The ticking began again that night. It was faint at first, like a single watch left on a dresser. Michelle woke with her heart racing, the sound embedded in her skull. She tore through her bag, through her coat pockets, searching for the parasite. But her wrist was bare, scarred, nothing more. The sound persisted. Jens stirred on the floor where he slept. "I hear it too," he said hoarsely. "It isn't the watch. It's the city." The days that follow blurred. The fog refused to lift. They found no other living soul. No police, no fishermen at the docks, no children cycling to school. The city had become a hollowed shell, ticking faintly beneath its streets. Michelle rationed what food she could scavenge, though her stomach rarely accepted more than a few bites. She felt hollow, light, as though her body itself were being pared away to save energy. At night, dreams came. She saw Henrik walking calmly through the fog, his watch glowing faintly, though she had seen it sink. He never looked at her, only ahead, as though guiding an invisible procession. The city followed him, walls shifting, windows blinking like eyes. She woke each morning with the taste of salt and iron on her tongue. On the fourth day, Jens's condition worsened. He coughed until blood stained the sheets. His eyes were sunken, feverish, but he refused rest. "We have to finish it," he muttered, pacing weakly despite his broken body. The sea wasn't enough. It never is. My grandfather said once the chain begins, it seeks a new weight, a new face to turn to. Michelle shivered. "You think it's still here?" Jens looked at her, eyes sharp. "I think it's still in you." Her blood turned to ice. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, staring into the fog. Nyhaven's painted houses loomed ghost-like, their colors leached to gray. The water below was black, still, reflecting nothing. Every so often she lifted her wrist, staring at the scarred skin. Sometimes it seemed to pulse faintly, as though an invisible strap still clung there. Sometimes she swore she heard the faint click of gears beneath her veins. When dawn came, Jens was gone. His pallet lay empty on the floor, sheets crumpled. A smear of blood trailed to the door. Michelle followed it into the hall, her heart hammering. The trail led outside, through the fog, winding toward Strajet. She stumbled after it, calling his name, though her voice was swallowed by the mist. She found him standing at an intersection, barefoot, shirt soaked with blood. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. He held something in his hands, something small, black, gleaming faintly even in the fog. Michelle froze. The watch. It dripped with seawater, as though freshly dredged. "Jens," she whispered. His lips moved soundlessly, repeating a rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. When he finally looked at her, his mouth twisted into Henrik's faint smile. Michelle staggered backward. "No, we drowned it. I cut it free." Jens's voice was not his own. It was layered, like Henrik's had been, but deeper, heavier. "Time cannot drown," he said. "It only pauses. You are already part of it, Michelle. You always were." The watch pulsed in his hand, and though it did not touch her skin, Michelle felt the strap tightening around her wrist again, ghostly, suffocating. She turned and ran. Fog closed around her, streets folding into one another. No matter which way she turned, she found herself back at Nyhaven, the black water lapping silently at the pier. Jens, no, the thing Jens had become, waited there. The watch dangled from his hand, ticking louder now, each pulse shaking the ground. "Come back to us," the layered voices whispered. "You cannot run from the hours that remain." Michelle dropped to her knees at the edge of the pier, chest heaving. She stared at the black water, desperate. The sea had betrayed her. There was nowhere else to go. Unless. Her gaze drifted to the buildings rising behind her, their windows flickering faintly like clock faces. The city itself ticked with the parasite's rhythm. Perhaps it wasn't the sea that could bury it. Perhaps it was the city. A thought bloomed in her mind, terrifying but clear. If the watch wanted alignment, what if she gave it more than it could bear? She stood slowly, turning to face Jens. Her hands no longer trembled. The wound at her wrist burned like a brand. "You want me?" she said, voice steady. "Then wind me. All the way." The smile spread across his face, empty and perfect. He stepped closer, gleaming. Michelle closed her eyes. The ticking rose, louder, faster, filling her veins, her skull, her breath. The city answered, lamps flickering in furious sequence, walls groaning as if shifting inward. Time itself bent, wound tight. Her heart raced until every beat was a hammer, every nerve a spark. And then, silence. Michelle opened her eyes. Jens stood frozen before her, watch clutched to his chest. His mouth hung open, eyes wide in shock. The black dial flickered erratically, symbols scrambling like broken hands on a face. The city groaned. Windows shattered, glass raining into the streets. Buildings cracked down their facades. The mechanism had wound too tight, its teeth grinding against themselves. Michelle felt the parasite recoil inside her veins, screaming without sound. She had given it what it craved, perfect alignment, complete obedience, until it collapsed under its own weight. Jens screamed. The sound was not his own, but a chorus of thousands, time unraveling at once. He crumpled to the ground, the watch shattering in his palm. Black shards scattered across the cobblestones, dissolving into smoke. The fog thinned. The city exhaled. For the first time, Michelle heard birds. She collapsed beside him, shaking uncontrollably. Jens lay motionless, eyes glazed, chest still. His blood pooled black against the stones. Michelle wanted to cry, but no tears came. Only the silence pressed against her, vast and unbearable. She looked at her wrist. The scar was still there, raw and jagged, but the phantom strap was gone. For now, she raised her eyes to the horizon, where dawn bled through the mist. The city stood broken but alive, and she wondered how long before another hand found the pieces. Chapter 8, Broken Hours. Michelle didn't remember how long she sat beside Jens's body. The fog had thinned to a veil, but the cold clung to her bones. Around her, the city was silent, not hollow but stunned, as though recovering from something vast. She pressed her hand to Jens's chest one last time. Nobody's, not them. His eyes stared glassy into the pale dawn. She whispered, "You saved me," though she wasn't sure it was true. Perhaps he had only delayed the inevitable. The streets were empty, but no longer twisted. Windows reflected light again. A distant bell chimed 7 times, and for the first time in days, the sound was only a bell, not an echo of a ticking heart. Michelle rose unsteadily. Her legs trembled as she left Jens where he lay. She told herself she'd return for him later, give him something like a burial. But she already knew she would not. The city would take him, as it had taken everything else. The museum was still standing. Michelle wandered there without meaning to, guided by instinct. Its facade loomed gray against the pale sky, doors ajar. She hesitated before entering, her chest tightening. Inside, dust floated in the air. Exhibits stood frozen in place. Bones under glass, coins arranged in neat lines, clocks ticking faintly in the horology wing. Michelle's blood ran cold. The clocks ticked in unison. She approached slowly. They were antique wall clocks, mantel clocks, carriage clocks. None of them wound, none touched in years. Yet each hand crept forward in perfect time. Her scar throbbed. "No," she whispered. "You're gone. You're finished." But the rhythm persisted, faint but undeniable. The watch was gone, yet its echo remained. Michelle locked herself in her office that night. The museum felt safer than the flat, though she wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was because here the ticking was confined, contained in glass cases and wood housings. She collapsed into the chair, exhaustion dragging her eyelids down. Sleep came quickly, and with it, dreams. She was back at the harbor. Jens stood alive, smiling faintly. But the smile was Henrik's. The water boiled with ticking black faces, thousands of watches rising together. Their hands spun wildly, pointing to no hour, to every hour. Jens reached for her wrist, and the strap slithered back into place. Michelle woke screaming. Her scar burned. She ripped the bandage off. The wound was not healing. It had grown deeper, veins darkening around it, branching outward like cracks in glass. Something was still inside her. Days passed without markers. Michelle scavenged food from abandoned shops, drank water from taps that still ran. The city remained empty, though sometimes she thought she saw movement in the fog. Shapes half-formed, gone when she blinked. At night, the ticking grew louder. She swore she heard whispers beneath it. Not words, not yet, but intent. The watch had broken, but its infection lingered. One evening she stood at the museum window, watching Nyhaven's lights flicker faintly across the water. She raised her scarred wrist. You want me? She whispered. Then finish it. The ticking stopped. For the first time in days, there was silence. And in that silence, Michelle heard footsteps. She turned slowly. Henrik stood in the hall, pale and perfect, as though he had never drowned. His watch was gone, but his eyes glowed faintly, silver ticking within their depths. You can't destroy time, he said softly. You only wound it, and time always heals. Michelle backed against the glass. Her heart hammered. You're dead. I saw you sink. Henrik smiled faintly. You saw a body sink. Not me. The clocks on the walls shuddered, their hands spinning faster. The ticking returned, louder, deeper. Michelle pressed her palms over her ears, but the sound was inside her, beating with her pulse. Henrik stepped closer. It has chosen you, Michelle. You wound it, yes. You stalled it, but now it needs you to carry it forward. You are the new weight, the pendulum. Without you, the hours stop. Michelle shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. I won't give it anything. Henrik leaned close. His breath smelled of salt and rust. You already have. Chapter 9, The Last Pendulum. Michelle fled the museum, Henrik's voice echoing in her ears. The city was alive again, but not human. Street lamps blinked in sequence. Crosswalk signals clicked red and green with no cars to obey them. The city ticked, and she ticked with it. She ran until her lungs burned, until she found herself again at the harbor. The water lay flat and dark, waiting. Her scar throbbed violently. She ripped at it, nails digging into her own flesh. Black fluid welled, thick and tar-like. The parasite had never left. Pieces of the watch had sunk into her veins, lodged there, winding her slowly from within. Michelle collapsed to her knees. Please, she whispered. To no one. To anyone. Take it. Take me. The water stirred. 1,000 black faces surfaced, watch dials gleaming faintly in the dim light. Hands spun wildly, pointing outward like compass needles. The sea boiled with time. Henrik's voice rose behind her, calm and sure. Every clock needs a pendulum. Every mechanism needs weight. That is what you are, Michelle. That is what you have always been. She turned. He stood at the edge of the pier, arms spread, eyes alight. The city's lamps flickered in rhythm with his words. You can resist, yes. You can run, but time always finds its weight. Always. Michelle looked at her wrist, the veins blackened, the scar pulsing faintly. She knew he was right. She was already part of it, but she still had one choice left. Not whether to carry it, but where. She rose, staggering to the water's edge. The black dials shimmered, waiting. Henrik watched silently, a faint smile playing on his lips. Michelle lifted her wrist high. If I am the pendulum, she whispered, then I will swing where I choose. She stepped forward into the water. Cold swallowed her instantly. The parasite pulsed violently, gears grinding in her veins. But she pushed deeper, dragging the infection with her. The city lights faded above. Her lungs screamed. The world narrowed. And then, stillness. The parasite pulsed one last time, a furious, broken beat. Then silence. Michelle's body sank into the black, carried by currents that had swallowed ships for centuries. The city above flickered, lights dying one by one. The clocks in the museum fell silent. On the pier, Henrik stood alone, his smile fading. For the first time, he looked uncertain, because without a pendulum, even the grandest clock cannot move. In Berlin months later, a fisherman dredged a net from the Spree. Among the weeds and rusted scrap lay a fragment of black glass, faintly curved, faintly gleaming. When he lifted it, he swore he heard a faint tick. He brought it home.